I got interested in herbs because I was a docent at the San Jose Historical Museum some decades ago, and a professor from UC Santa Cruz came to give us a talk about herbal medicine because that's the way things were traditionally practiced before there were medical schools in our country. And there were a lot of different schools of medicine. So I know there's a Markham school in Placerville. Well, the Markham House, there's also a Markham school in San Jose, but the Markham House is at the museum. And so the Markham House is at the museum, and there's an herb garden there, and that's what we started out to study. And so I got very interested in knowing more, and in the process of acquiring information, I learned about this character. He's probably the most famous person you've never heard of. And his name is Nicholas Culpeper. So that's mainly what this talk is about today. Okay, back in the 17th century, there was a lot of controversy over who is in control of medicine because, well, that's one of the things we're going to find out. So these are kind of the learning objectives. And there's a lot of verbiage on here, and I hope you bear with me. I just didn't want to leave anything out. So it goes from how medicine was managed to Nicholas Culpeper, how he was a threat, the imbalances that caused disease, and some elements of how that was identified for their practice at the time, and elements of astrology and how herbs relate to the stars. Okay, so here we have in the Renaissance, it was just the beginning of scientific observation. And typically, the physicians were the ones that dealt with internal. Surgeons were typically barbers. That's why you have the barber scroll. It's the blue blood and the red blood, and they were the surgeons because they're the ones that had the sharp instruments. Okay, so physicians wanted more control, and I think that's kind of the case today about their therapeutic compounds. So there was a big controversy between the grocers. They're the ones that provided the herbs by the gross. That's why they're called grocers. And maybe they had something to do with growing them. And so there was the grocers, the apothecaries, which that's like today's pharmacist, and the physicians. And everybody was trying to have control over their domain. So,
I'm sorry, I don't know why it's doing that.
King James, now King James is the one that we see his name on the Bible. And so there's going to be kind of a strange relationship when we get to Mr. Culpeper. But anyway, he decided how this would come down, and he decided that if you had skill and knowledge, then that was a little more advanced than just being the grocer. So he granted authority to the apothecaries that they could dispense, and the physicians could use the medicine the way they saw fit. So that one's kind of hard to read, but it took 200 years before the apothecary, it took 200 years before this act of 1850 was passed that's still kind of in use today. And so anyway, but at that time, the apothecaries could not give advice. The surgeons could not use any medication unless it was external. And the physicians had some other limitations, so they all had their limitations. So here's the man, Nicholas Culpeper. And Nicholas means victory of the people, which he kind of lives up to his name, as we'll find out. And then Culpeper was a gatherer of pepper. So this is I want you to pay attention to that graphic because it's very dramatic in expressing his life. His father died, they don't know. One source says 2 weeks before he was born or just after he was born. But anyway, so he was fatherless. His mother moved in with her parents. Her father was a wealthy, well-to-do clergyman. And so he taught his grandson, Nicholas, Latin and Greek, and the grandmother taught him about the herbs, but he showed a lot of promise, and he was going to be groomed for Cambridge. So when he was 10, he had this encounter with this astrologer and thought that was kind of an interesting place to go with his interests. And then he does go to Cambridge, but at age 16, he's cutting school and he has more interest in the medical school than studying theology as his grandfather intended. So he is a rebellious teenager and he meets this girl and they fall in love and they're gonna elope. And that evening, lightning strikes her carriage and she's killed. She was struck dead, as you can see. So that's part of the graphic up there. And so if that wasn't bad enough, the next year his mother died. So he was devastated and he became a recluse, and his grandfather was very disgusted with him and signed him on to be an indentured servant as an apothecary apprentice. Well, his interest in astrology grew because he met this William Lilly and had a chance encounter, and then he married this 15-year-old who became substantially wealthy because of an inheritance. And that enabled him to leave the apprenticeship, and he bought a home and started a little practice outside the outskirts, right on the outskirts of London. So, Nicholas Culpeper, I don't know why that graphic is looking like that, but he's an English apothecary, astrologer, and physician. And he is famous, even though you haven't heard of him, because just like the St. James Bible, his book is still in print in various versions. So, this is a video that doesn't work. But if you want to link. You can watch it. It's only a minute long, but it's really kind of cool because.
It'll be in the video too.
Oh, good. Okay. Then you have something to look forward to. Okay, so the video that you'll be looking forward to is from the BBC, because the author of this book did a program on Nicholas Culpeper. So what's really interesting about him, besides the fact that he translated the physician's, it's sort of a physician's manual, he translated it from Latin into English, and that was revolutionary. And there's a version of it. So then the Civil War happens in England, and Culpeper strikes out as this major radical, and he really had resentment toward lawyers, physicians, the monarchy. He had pamphlets. He was really radical. But at the same time, because of his knowledge, he wanted to help the average people, the poor people, with their health. And so he opened his shop outside of London, and he made medicine more accessible to poor people. So that was quite revolutionary. So here's some quotes. I'm writing for the press a translation of the physician's medicine book from Latin into English so that all my fellow countrymen and apothecaries can understand what the doctors write on their bills. Hitherto, they made medicine a secret conspiracy, writing prescriptions in mysterious Latin to hide ignorance and to impress upon the patient. They want to keep their book a secret, not for everybody to know. So here's another version. It was also called Culpeper's Herbal. So the only publication besides King James Bible that's never been out of print. So these are interesting quotes too, to show how radical. They're bloodsuckers, true vampires, have learned little since Hippocrates, and bloodletting for ailments above the midriff and purging for those below. They evacuate and revulse their patients until they faint. I looked up black hellebore. It's the Christmas flower. Oh, yeah. Okay. This poisonous stuff is a favorite laxative. It's surprising that they're so popular and that some patients even recover. My own poor patients would not endure this taxing and costly treatment. The victims of physicians only survive since they're from the rich and robust stock, the plethoric, red-skinned residents of Cheapside, Westminster, and St. James. And you may be wondering why J.K. Rowling would be in this presentation. It's because when she discovered Culpeper's book and all these names like mugwort, it was inspirational. And plus, she got to understand how to use these in various concoctions. So that's her quote. It's not. We transferred my Mac version into the PC, and some things aren't coming out. But that's okay. Okay, so Culpeper was accused of witchcraft. And the Society of Apothecaries tried to limit his practice in the early months of the Civil War. So he, being such a radical, you can imagine the flack he got. So he wanted to fight against King Charles and the monarchy. So he went into the battlefield, and he was a surgeon. They said, "Oh, you know how to do this?" And so he was very active as a surgeon until a bullet lodged in his chest. And he didn't really fully recover from that wound. He collaborated with this astrologer, and they predicted the king's death. He died of tuberculosis. He was only 37 years old. Only one of his children lived to adulthood, and his widow married an astrologer. So that's kind of the story of Nicholas Culpeper. So the plague was, there was certainly the one of 1350, that was a biggie, but it also it came around again. And so I didn't read this anywhere, but I'm sensing that he was alive during 1625, and maybe that inspired him when he saw so much death and devastation. So anyway, this gives kind of an outlook on how medicine was dealt with. So this was a doctor. And you wouldn't imagine that being a doctor. And if you were, can you imagine being a little kid and this guy comes over your bed? My God. Anyway, so all these implements had a purpose. And the mask was filled with herbs so that the doctor wouldn't have to smell the stench. And there were goggles to protect his eyes. And all doctors wore that wide hat. He had the scalpel because the Black Plague were these bulbous, blistering boils. And then there's the pomander that had more herbs in it. And around, dangling below his belt, is a bunch of garlic, okay? And he has the cloak down to his feet, and underneath there's fishermen's wanderings, but also it would be covered with, his clothing would be covered with either wax or like bacon grease, because that would kind of trap if there were fleas that were the transmitters, would kind of trap them and protect the doctor. Oh, that was supposed to be, I didn't want you to see that was supposed to be a doctor. So that kind of happened in reverse. Sorry. Okay, the epidemic emptied London streets, nobility fled to the country, and the king and his court retreated to Salisbury. So this just explains how devastating things were. They were losing the apothecaries, they were losing doctors. So if Culpeper had lived beyond 1654, could he have saved lives? Who knows? Okay, so now we come to the doctrine of signatures. And if you've never heard of that before, you've probably heard like a walnut looks kind of like a brain, so they must be good for you. or carrots. Uh, Carrots are good for your eyes. So that's what the doctrine of signatures is about. Okay, so then we get into the zodiac aspect because Culpeper was really into it. So this is just sort of a little overview based on his publication. And here, this one is Culpeper's Complete Astrology. So he actually had drawings of all the herbs and their descriptions and how they're used in what capacity, if they were going to be a poultice or they were going to be a tea, or so how to administer them. Okay, so this is another aspect from the ancient Greeks. And so he breaks it up in with the signs as well. So each sign is designated an element: fire, air, earth, and water. And that indicates hot and cold. And if you notice on the right side, that's spring and summer, and the left side is fall and winter. And this gets even a little more involved. You can just see from the graphic. So if you're in Aries, anybody in Aries? Oh, I know you are, April 1st. Okay, so this gives you an idea of the fire sign is, Aries is a fire sign. It's ruled by Mars. The dominion it has over the head and the brain and the herbs associated. So we'll just kind of go through this. And Taurus is ruled by the earth and Venus. Comfrey is an interesting herb. It kind of has the properties of aloe vera. Anyway. Okay, this is the last one. So a lot of pharmaceuticals come from herbs. There was a book, The Rainbow and the Serpent, and they made a film of it, and it's a terrible film. Terrible. It doesn't really go with the book. But the book is a true story about a guy that that went to Harvard, I think it was Harvard, and he wanted to study botany, and he met this guy who was an older gentleman and who was just anxious for anybody to explore South America because there were plants that were going to be bulldozed or whatever, and he wanted to save whatever plants there were because they were losing the shaman that knew what the properties were that were therapeutic. And so the guy gets interested in that, but there's a detour and he ends up in Haiti to try and find out what the substance is that makes zombies. So that's a whole other story. So this is the essence of our Nicholas Culpeper, and I think he's a very interesting character. And so if you want to learn more, here are some resources. Oh, I see something. And thank you. Questions? Are there any questions?
So on the astrological charts, the herbs that are mentioned for each one, are those herbs that someone should be taking, or are they healing for that particular sign, or what?
I think it means that, thanks. Okay, so the question is, when, I could back up to Cheryl. Is there any particular sign?
No, any.
Okay, so the herbs at the bottom are those intended for a person who happens to be an Aquarius. I think what it means is that these are herbs that are associated with that sign, so it could be beneficial, but those herbs are probably cultivated for a specific ailment that maybe Aquarius is lower legs and ankles. So maybe if somebody who was a Scorpio had something, on their foot, they could go to Aquarius herbs as a remedy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
So our example right here, it says Aquarius, Dominion. Who has Dominion? He had, Aquarius people have Dominion over the sign. Legs and
Well,
arms.
that sign has dominion over legs and ankles. So if you are of that sign, that could mean that that's either your strength or it could be a vulnerability. But I'm not an astrologer. I just, was curious about Culpeper. Yes.
So just kind of continuing along that theme, if you were just to totally forget about astrology, would those herbs address, like for example, in this example, are those herbs specific for lower legs and ankle, for example?
Possibly. And that's not the only herb. Here, this book might explain some of those things, and to tell you the truth, I haven't read it, but I did have a little book, which is why I bought that one. I thought maybe it would be like the little one that I lost. And that little book is what triggered my interest in Culpeper in the first place. And so, and it did make associations about the different astrological signs and corresponding herbs. But it's just...
What is the name of that book again?
This book is called Culpeper's Complete Astrology. And this book is the one that's never been out of print. There's various versions, and you get it on Amazon. Should be able to get it at a library. Culpeper's Complete Herbal, over 400 herbs and their uses, based on his information.
So for example, in that book, is the astrology a major factor, or is it more of a lookup? I got a problem with my foot.
In this one?
Yes.
Okay,
What's the question?
oh,
Yeah, the question was, is in the Culpeper book there, is that more of a lookup where you can have an ailment and find an herb that
okay, mainly what it does is it identifies the herb and not necessarily the ailment, but then it'll tell you what it's good for. So it could be that different versions organize it differently. I don't, yeah. Yes.
So that book doesn't tell you how to prep the herb, right?
Okay, so does the book tell you how to prepare the herb for medical uses? I don't think so. It tells you the description, it tells the description, the place where you can find it, the time when it flowers or fruits. And there's another section called Government and Virtues. Interesting. So this plant is hot and moist and under the sign Libra. It helps the yellow jaundice, the dropsy, the pains, the loins. So it does explain what the herb is for, but you have to look up the herb and then find out, at least in this version.
Is that book also show you what kind of herb, and you can identify, is it a color or black and white?
Oh, this one is in black and white, but there is a color version.
Okay.
So are the herbs featured in color?
So you have mentioned there's Markham School. So one school has a herb garden.
Oh, yeah.
So anybody could go over there and see it.
That was in San Jose, and I haven't been there in a very long time.
Well,
But I think that, doesn't the master gardener, yes, Mary?
Master Gardener has the demonstration garden, and there's an herb garden in that demonstration garden. There's a number, I think 16 little gardens. One of them is an herb garden. So you can go there and actually see the plant and garden.
A lot of ducks in the audience.
There was an herb society in El Dorado County.
There is, yeah.
I have another question. Are you, Rosemary, this may be too personal, but are you a proponent of using herbs for yourself?
Well,
Used by her husband. I feel this thing under my tongue at night, and I say, "You're touching my tongue."
no.
And I always feel a little better, and then suddenly,
All right.
I recently got some nettle tea.
I use herbs all the time, so I just put,
Yeah.
yeah.
And when I broke my ankle, I did comfrey.
Comfrey.
Okay. Yes.
So this woman just said I use herbs all the time, and I've heard, okay, I'm gonna stand up. I've heard lots of stories about the old wives and their herbs. And it sounds like there was almost a two-tiered system, what the doctors wanted and what what the women knew. There was a lot of
Yes.
knowledge about herbs that didn't have to go as far as these guys. A lot of people knew about
And
it.
a lot of the women that knew about the herbs got burned. It was called witch hunt, Salem witch. Yeah.
I'll sit down.
Well, okay, before, in this country, there wasn't, until the 20th century, there was, doctors could just hang up a shingle. There was no, authorization until this Alexander Flexner, who was a high school principal, wasn't even a medical person. But he took it upon himself to go around the country and find out how people were practicing medicine, and he went to medical schools where they might be, and he decided John Hopkins was the standard everybody should follow. But before that, what did people do? They had to rely on, what the, grandma did. Yeah, it just got passed down into generations, and we've kind of maybe lost it, yeah.
You just reminded me, I just finished a book called The History of the World in 6 Classes. And it's beer, wine, liqueur, coffee, tea, and Coca-Cola. And it's the political stuff behind it, but the Coca-Cola thing started off as a snake oil remedy.
Yeah.
And so over time, it got involved with the medical stuff, and they had to, because they were selling it to children, they were focused on giving it, selling it to advertising for children, and people were like, okay, let's knock that shit off. And so, it got involved with the medical stuff in the early,
Well, because
1800s.
early on, Coca-Cola had cocaine.
It had cocaine, and there was another drug in there, and they took the cocaine out, but the other drug is actually, the plant is still part of the secret formula, as far as I know.
Well, and 7-Up, the up in 7-Up
yeah,
was
yeah.
lithium.
Yeah. I didn't know about that one.
I never knew
Dr.
that.
Pepper was some,
Versus the herbs we had in the 60s.
you're supposed to take it into it.
Back in the early 1900s, when Flexner showed up, actually what it amounts to is they had the two sides, the herbalists versus the doctors. And they took decided that we can't have those herb people destroying us. And so they went to all the colleges and gave money to them, put people on the, we'll give you a grant to teach our Western medicine. We will teach you what to say and what to do, but in order to use that money, we want somebody on your board of directors to sit and direct where we're going with this. And so they slowly but surely, over about 40 years, they got rid of all the places that were teaching about herbs.
You're right, with this professor from UC Santa Cruz that was conducting the class teaching us about herbs, he said he had, I think it was like a grandfather and great uncle. And one was an allopathic practitioner, and one was a homeopathic practitioner. And so those were two schools of medicine that were in conflict. And the whole thing about homeopathy at the San Jose Historical Museum, we had this building that was a doctor's office. It was sort of like a Dr. Welby situation. Anyway, the building was moved from Santa Clara to the museum. And there was, when you entered, there was like this case that had all these various homeopathic remedies. And so one time I was in there, this family came in and they didn't speak very good English. It turns out they were from Holland. And they saw this and they were just going, they were trying to ask me where they could get this for their children who had a cold or something, and they would, then I couldn't tell them where to go. But also, the royal family, I don't know to the extent now with this King Charles, but they practiced their physicians were homeopathic, and look how long the Queen and her mother lived. Just saying. Yes.
A long time ago, I did take a homeopathic class, and I deal, and, you know, so the generalization is like, if we got poison oak, we're gonna take poison oak. So we'll go find a little tablet.
Same, that's the
Repeat the
homeopathic.
question.
Oh, she's explained she took a class in homeopathy, and the idea that if you have poison oak, then you treat it with poison oak.
And little tiny tablets, it's just, you know, just and I use orange for bruises, and it works so good.
Yeah. Well, one time I was in Washington DC, and
Getting their honey.
my mother, we're walking along, I don't know, Rhode Island or Rhode Street, and she got all excited because this was the house where Alexander Graham Bell blew up the basement. At the time, it was the National Paint and Varnish Society's office. But anyway, I was interested because here was this fountain, and it was dedicated to Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy. And apparently it got really dilapidated, and they revived it maybe 20 years ago or something. I haven't been there since, but, so there is a fountain dedicated to him in Washington DC. So, any other questions? That's okay.
Do you yourself use other herbs that you're teaching?
Okay, the question is, do I use any of the herbs that we've been talking about in the presentation? On occasion.
Okay, in that case, do you teach the class?
No.
That's ordering a medical, teaching medical license. So, yeah.
I used to call on doctors and provide the features and benefits of various pharmaceutical products. That is in a past life.
Would it be invading your privacy if we ask what herbs you take?
Well, I don't take any on a regular basis. Yeah, I think there's some value in turmeric. Yeah, and recently we've tried some nettle tea. And
That makes my arm go up like this. 2 cups.
So it works.
so,
What is it supposed to?
no, it's something to explore, and there's lots of information out there. Yes.
I know people make called tincture with the herb. Do you have any knowledge?
No, I don't. I really don't. There's tinctures, there's poultices, and,
Repeat the question.
well, it's kind of been asked before. Do I make any preparations out of these? No, I don't. Well, that wraps